Before we get into the story, say hello in the comments and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps the channel. The Imperial Palace of Andromeda was high above the clouds on the planet Vexera. Big crystal towers reached up to the sky and caught the light from 3 different suns that were in the alien atmosphere. The whole thing sparkled like a huge jewel hanging in the air. Most of the time, the palace was quiet and orderly, a place of quiet dignity where the royal family did their business away from the chaos of the world below. But today was different from most days. Today was not the same. Princess Lyra was going to pick the person who would be her king today. Jake Miller slowly pushed his cleaning cart down one of the long marble hallways. His footsteps echoed in the huge hallway that seemed to go on forever, and the wheels squeaked a little as he moved. He stopped for a moment to take in the polished floors and the high ceilings that were covered in art from many different worlds. He had worked here for 6 months, but the beauty of this place still amazed him sometimes. But Jake wasn't here to look at the buildings. He came here to work. Jake was only a janitor. Nothing more, nothing less. He was a person from Earth who took this job because he really needed the money. His family back home was in a lot of debt because his father got sick, and the medical bills were too high for them to ever be able to pay. Jake had heard that there were jobs available at the Imperial Palace after Earth joined the Galactic Assembly. He could find better pay and honest work than he could at home. He applied, was accepted, and left Earth on the first transport ship 3 days later. He sent most of his paycheck home every month and kept just enough to get by. The work itself wasn't very interesting. Jake did all the little things that kept the huge palace running smoothly, like cleaning floors, emptying trash cans, and fixing broken equipment. It was okay that no one really noticed him. That was how he liked it. He did his job, stayed out of trouble, and counted down the days until his family would be debt-free. It's easy.
Calm.
Quiet. But today, the palace was not peaceful. There was a lot of energy and excitement in the whole building today. Today was a mess. A lot of princes had come from all over the galaxy for something called the Royal Trial. Jake had never seen anything like that before. Over the past 3 days, ships of all shapes and sizes have been landing, each one bringing more impressive royalty than the last. The staff at the palace had been working around the clock to get the rooms ready, set up the banquets, and make sure everything was perfect for the important guests. Jake had to keep the main hallways clean, which meant he got to see all the princes who came in up close. And what a sight they were! The first person to arrive was Prince Drax of the Titanium Empire. He was at least 8 feet tall, had broad shoulders, and a commanding presence that made people step back when he walked by. His whole body was covered in golden armor that shone so brightly that it hurt to look at it directly. The armor wasn't just for show. Jake had heard guards say that it was made of a rare metal that could withstand starfire. 50 armed soldiers marched in perfect formation with Prince Drax. His voice was loud like thunder when he spoke. There was also Prince Vorn from the Silicon Worlds. He wasn't natural at all. His body was all mechanical, made of cutting-edge technology that scientists on Earth could only dream of. There were glowing blue lights pulsing under his silver metal skin, and his movements were unnaturally smooth and precise. It seemed like his eyes were camera lenses that could see in all kinds of light. Jake thought he was interesting but also a little scary. Prince Vorn had a group of robot helpers with him at all times. They recorded data and looked at everything they saw. Prince Kellen of the Fire Nebula might have been the most exciting of all. There were flames all around him that danced on his skin but never burned him. The fire changed colors from dark red to bright orange to bright white, depending on how he felt. The flames moved slowly when he was calm. They roared louder when he got angry or excited. People who worked at the palace had to stay far away from him, and special spells were put in his room to keep him from accidentally starting a fire. He walked with complete confidence, as if he had never doubted anything in his life. There were only 3 of them. There were more of them. Prince Talon from the Sky Cities had huge wings and could fly. Prince Ren from the Deep Ocean World. He needed a special water suit to stay alive in the air. Prince Zale from the Crystal Caves had skin made of living gemstones that changed color. Each one was strong. Every one of them was richer than you could ever imagine. Each one stood for a whole civilization. and they all thought they should marry Princess Lyra. Jake had never met the princess in person. He had seen her a few times from a distance, walking through the halls with her advisors or standing on balconies that looked out over the palace grounds. She was so beautiful that it was hard to believe. Her skin was a soft violet color that shone when light hit it, making it look like she was covered in tiny stars. Her eyes were completely silver, with no pupils, which should have been scary but wasn't. They seemed wise and knowing, as if they could see through any lie. Her long, white hair floated around her head like she was underwater, moving slowly even when there was no wind. Princess Lyra was beautiful, but she was more than that. People who worked at the palace had told Jake that she was smart and kind. She was only 25 years old when her parents retired, and she became the leader of Vexera. This made her the youngest ruler in the planet's long history. Since she became queen, she had changed trade deals, set up new schools, and traveled to every part of her world to see the problems her people were having. People who worked for her respected, admired, and really loved her. Now she had to pick someone to rule with her. The royal trial was meant to do that. Jake finished mopping one part of the floor and pushed his cart toward the grand hall. He could hear voices coming from inside the huge room. The big doors were partly open, and he could see the princes who had come to see Princess Lyra standing in front of her throne. He shouldn't stop to listen. He had things to do. But he couldn't help but be curious. He stood just outside the door so that he could hear without being seen. It was clear that Princess Lyra was speaking. It was calm but had a natural air of authority. The royal trial will put your heart, mind, and strength to the test. Only the person who really knows what it means to be a leader will stand by me as king. The princes were excited and spoke over each other as they said they were ready and sure. Jake shook his head a little and went back to his cleaning cart. This wasn't his world. These weren't his people. He was just a janitor from Earth who was barely getting by and trying to help his family stay alive. He didn't care about love, royalty, or politics in the galaxy. He picked up his mop and walked to the next hallway that needed to be cleaned. Princess Lyra stood on her throne platform behind him, looking out at the princes who had gathered. They couldn't quite figure out what she was thinking. She had a secret that no one else knew about. She was worn out. I'm so sick of people who are arrogant and proud and only care about power. None of these princes were going to get what they wanted out of this trial. Jake moved his cart around a corner and began to clean a new part of the floor. He had no idea that everything in his life was about to change. He didn't know that Princess Lyra's silver eyes would soon be watching him very closely. He didn't know that the most unlikely person could sometimes become the most important. For now, he was just Jake Miller, the human janitor, working and dreaming about the day when his family would no longer be in debt. That's all. Not a thing less. That's what he thought. The palace bells rang out across Vexera just as the sun was starting to rise. Jake was already up and drinking his morning coffee in the small break room that the maintenance staff used. He could hear the noise coming from upstairs as servants hurried to get ready for whatever Princess Lyra had planned. Today was the official start of the royal trial, and everyone in the palace was buzzing with excitement. Jake drank his coffee, put on his tool belt, and went down to the lower levels, where he had been told to work for the day. He finally had time to fix the water pipe that had been leaking for a week. He could hear the princes gathering in the grand hall above as he went down the stairs. Their excited and confident voices could be heard through the air conditioning system. Then he heard Princess Lyra's voice, loud and clear, making the first announcement. "Get me the most valuable thing in the galaxy," she said. "You have until tomorrow at sunset. Tell me what you care about the most." As soon as the princes started making plans, the grand hall filled with noise. Jake could hear them yelling at their servants, telling them to get their ships ready, and arguing over who would find the best treasure. In just a few minutes, the sound of ships launching could be heard all over the palace grounds. The princes were running in all directions, each one trying to be better than the others. Jake shook his head as he knelt down next to the pipe that was leaking in the basement hallway. Rare treasures from all over the galaxy. He couldn't even begin to imagine what it would be like to have the money and freedom to fly into space in search of valuable things. The world around him was so much smaller. Repair the pipe. sweep the floors, send money back home. That was how things were for him. He worked all day, replacing old pipes and making sure everything was sealed correctly. He had dirty hands and a sore back by the end of the day, but the leak was fixed. He thought to himself, small wins. The next day was even more chaotic. The first prince came back while Jake was cleaning the floors in one of the upper hallways. Prince Drax was the one who came, and he didn't come quietly. His huge ship landed with a loud bang that shook the whole palace. When he came out with something wrapped in thick protective cloth, guards rushed to help him. Jake watched from a distance as Prince Drax walked into the grand hall. Other employees whispered excitedly about what he might have discovered. Prince Vorn came an hour later in his sleek silver ship. Then Prince Kellen showed up in a boat that looked like it was made of solidified fire. One by one, all the princes came back, each bringing or carrying something they thought would win Princess Lyra's heart. That night was the ceremony for the presentation. Jake shouldn't have been there, but he was cleaning a side hallway with a small window that looked out over the grand hall. He could see it all. First was Prince Drax. Two of his soldiers brought in a huge crystal that was as big as a boulder and glowed from the inside. Prince Drax proudly said, "This diamond came from the core of a dying star. It took my best miners 3 days of non-stop work in temperatures that could melt steel. There are only 5 of them in the whole known galaxy. It is worth more than some planets." The people who had gathered gasped in shock. The diamond was truly amazing. It cast rainbow light all over the hall. But Jake saw that Princess Lyra just nodded politely. There was no excitement in her silver eyes as she looked at the treasure. No happiness. Just recognition. Prince Vorn then stepped forward with something much smaller, but it seems even more valuable. He held up a crystal that was only as big as his mechanical fist. "This data crystal holds all the knowledge that has been collected by 1,000 civilizations," he said. "Languages, sciences, arts, and histories are all perfectly preserved. Some of these civilizations are no longer around. This is the result of millions of years of learning and wisdom. It can't be replaced." Again, the crowd was wowed. A few of the scholars present looked like they were about to pass out at the thought of such a treasure. But Princess Lyra's face stayed the same. She looked closely at the crystal and then put it aside with a polite nod. Prince Kellen walked up with confidence, with his flames always around him. He carefully opened a big, fancy box that he had put on the floor. There was an egg inside that was about the size of a human head and glowed with a lot of heat. He said, "A phoenix egg. It burns with a fire that will never go out. The creature inside will live for 10,000 years before being reborn in fire when it hatches. There is nothing else like it in this galaxy or any other." The egg was beautiful, with warm light pulsing through it. But Princess Lyra didn't seem to care this time either. She looked at it like someone would look at a pretty picture, thankful but not moved. The other princes showed off their treasures one by one. Weapons from long ago. Plants that only bloom once every 100 years. Metals that could not be scratched or broken. Technology from civilizations that are no longer around. Each thing was truly amazing and worth more than anyone could imagine. And Princess Lyra said no to all of them, not too harshly. She thanked each prince for what they had done. She knew how valuable and rare what they brought was. But then she said something that made everyone confused. "These are great, for real, but they are not what I want." The princes looked at each other in shock. What could be more rare than what they had shown? What could be more valuable than diamonds from dying stars or knowledge from 1,000 worlds? Jake looked out the window and was just as confused. He didn't know what the princess wanted, but it was clear that it wasn't money or power. She was looking for something else that none of these powerful princes understood. Jake went back to work in the lower levels of the palace, while all of this drama was going on upstairs. This was where the regular workers did their jobs, away from the politics and glitz of the upper floors. The lower levels were darker, smaller, and full of machinery, storage rooms, and the infrastructure that kept the palace running. He was walking down one of the supply corridors when he saw Mara having trouble with a few big boxes. Mara was an old Vexern woman who worked in the palace kitchens. Her skin had lost its violet color over time, and her white hair was pulled back into a simple bun. It was clear that she was having trouble carrying 3 heavy boxes that were stacked on top of each other. Jake didn't even give it a second thought. He just did it. "I'll help you with that," he said, and before she could drop the boxes, he quickly took them from her arms. Mara looked up at him in shock, but then her tired face broke into a warm smile. Her old eyes crinkled at the corners with real thanks. "You're a good person," she said softly. "People don't pay much attention to us lower servants. Most people walk by without even noticing us." Jake shrugged and changed how he was holding the boxes. He simply said, "We all work here. We need to help one another. Where do these need to go?" Mara said, "The storage room at the end of this hall," as she walked slowly next to him. "I don't have as much strength as I used to. These boxes seem to get heavier every year, or maybe I'm just getting weaker." Jake told her, "You're doing fine. Everyone needs help at some point. That's fine." Mara told him about her grandchildren who lived in the city below the palace as they walked down the hall together. Jake really wanted to know what they were talking about, so he listened and asked questions. He carefully stacked the boxes where she told him to in the storage room, making sure they were stable and wouldn't fall. Mara said, "Thanks again. You have a kind heart. Your family back on Earth must be very happy with you." Jake smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "I hope so. I'm just trying to do what's best for them." Jake had no idea, and there was no way he could have known, that Princess Lyra was watching the whole thing. She had security cameras in every room and hallway of the palace. She could see everything that went on inside her house. And at that moment, she was in her private chambers, watching Jake help an old servant carry boxes without being asked, without expecting anything in return, and with no one important around to see and praise him for it. Princess Lyra leaned in and stared intently at the screen with her silver eyes. She had noticed this human janitor doing small acts of kindness before, but she wasn't sure. She was starting to get it now. While princes flew across the galaxy looking for rare things to impress her, this simple man was right there in her palace, showing her something much more valuable. Kindness. Being humble. The urge to help people who needed it without thinking about it or getting anything in return. She saw Jake finish helping Mara and then go back to fix another piece of broken equipment in a different part of the building. Not much fanfare. There is no audience. Just being decent all the time. Princess Lyra leaned back in her chair and smiled a little. The royal trial was showing her exactly what she wanted it to, but not in the way that anyone thought. The second challenge had come and gone, and the results were the same. Princess Lyra had asked the princes to solve a riddle that had stumped scholars for hundreds of years. They brought computers, advisors, magical objects, and groups of the smartest people from their own worlds. They worked for days, filling rooms with numbers and ideas. But none of them were able to find the answer. The riddle had nothing to do with brains or technology. It was about knowing how to find balance and wisdom, which are things that can't be bought or calculated. Jake had accidentally found the answer while cleaning the library and listening to 2 palace scholars talk about it. It was easy to solve the riddle once you stopped trying to think too much. He wrote down his thoughts on a piece of scrap paper and left it on a desk without even signing it. When a scholar gave it to Princess Lyra, and she saw on camera that the human janitor had easily solved something that had baffled the smartest people in the galaxy, her interest in Jake grew even more. But now was time for the third challenge, and this one was different. This one was risky. There was an announcement that echoed through every hallway of the palace in the morning. Everyone stopped what they were doing when Princess Lyra spoke. Her voice was steady, but it had a weight to it. "Show me your strength," she said. "Show me your strength by facing the Guardian of the Void." Jake was changing light panels in a maintenance tunnel when he heard the announcement. Other workers had told him stories about the Guardian. It was a test that had been used for hundreds of years to see how good warriors were. No one had ever beaten it. No one even came close. The thing was supposed to be scary, a mix of cutting-edge technology and raw predatory power meant to push fighters to their limits. The challenge took place in the Palace Combat Arena, a huge round room deep underground with walls that were strong enough to withstand explosions and energy blasts. By late morning, everyone who worked at the palace was talking about what was going on. Jake tried to concentrate on his work, but the noises and vibrations coming from below were too loud to ignore. There was a lot going on down there. Of course, Prince Drax went first. The man had never given up in a fight before. Later, maintenance workers who had been sent to fix the damage told Jake that Drax had walked into the arena with complete confidence, his golden armor shining in the bright lights. The Guardian had been waiting for him in the middle of the room. The thing was huge, at least 20 feet tall. Its body was a strange mix of living muscle and mechanical parts, and it was covered in black armor that looked like it absorbed light. Its eyes glowed red, showing that it was smart in a way that was both strange and planned. There were a lot of arms coming out of its body, and each one had a different weapon. Even though it was big, it moved very quickly. Prince Drax had let loose all of his power. Plasma cannons that could cut through the hulls of starships. Energy blades that vibrated at frequencies that could cut through almost anything. Explosive charges that could knock down buildings. The Guardian blocked all attacks. The armor could take plasma fire. Because it was fast, it could avoid blade strikes. It seemed to know what Drax would do before he did it. Drax was thrown against the wall of the arena hard enough to break his armor, which was supposed to be unbreakable. The fight lasted 17 minutes. He had to be carried out on a medical stretcher, awake but badly hurt. His pride hurt more than his body. Next up was Prince Vorn, who tackled the challenge with cold, mechanical accuracy. He looked at how the Guardian moved, figured out how to attack, and used electromagnetic pulses to shut down any technology. But the Guardian changed. Its systems changed in real time, learning from each attack and coming up with ways to stop them in seconds. Vorn's technological edge didn't matter when he was up against something that could improve itself faster than he could come up with a plan. Kellen, the prince, brought fire. Huge storms of fire that made the arena into a hell. The heat made the observation windows crack because the temperature got so high. But the Guardian didn't catch fire. It didn't seem to absorb the energy. Instead, it got bigger and stronger with each wave of fire Kellen threw at it. The Guardian got stronger the more power Kellen used. He had to back off when his own flames started to wear him out, and the Guardian got stronger. The Guardian faced each prince in turn. They all had their own skills and strengths. Everyone thought of it as a problem that could be solved with better tactics or more force. And they all failed. Some lasted longer than others, but the outcome was always the same. Loss. Injury. Go back. The Guardian stood in the middle of the arena, waiting for the next challenger to come along. Princess Lyra watched all the fights from her own balcony that looked out over the arena. Her expression never changed. She wasn't excited to see these shows of power. Not happy. These princes took the challenge exactly how she thought they would. They saw a monster that needed to be killed and a problem that could be solved with strength and violence. They thought of it as a battle they had to win. They all missed the truth. The Guardian was not meant to be defeated. It was meant to be impossible to beat with strength. The real test was whether anyone would notice that and do something else. If anyone would be able to see past the violence and understand what the Guardian really stood for. So far, no one had. Jake was working in the gardens on the east side of the grounds while all of this fighting and chaos was going on deep below the palace. The irrigation system had developed a number of leaks in the past few weeks, and the plants were beginning to suffer from inconsistent watering. Jake had spent most of the morning looking for the problem, following pipes through flower beds and under decorative stones. The gardens were lovely, with plants from many different worlds that were all well cared for to make a calm place away from the palace's formal areas. Jake liked his job here. He could think while he worked because it was quiet. The sound of water in the fountains made me feel better. He was kneeling next to a piece of exposed pipe, tightening a loose connection, when he heard someone crying. There were small, hiccuping sobs coming from somewhere close by. Jake put down his wrench and stood up to look around. He saw a little girl sitting on the ground with her face in her hands near one of the big decorative fountains. She was Vexarin and looked to be 5 or 6 years old. Her skin was pale violet, and her hair was white, which is typical of her people. She cried, and her small shoulders shook. Jake had a vague memory of her. He had seen her father, who worked in the kitchen, a few times on the lower levels of the palace. Jake walked over and knelt down next to her, staying far enough away so he wouldn't scare her. He said softly, "Hey there. What's wrong?" The little girl looked up at him with silver eyes that were full of tears. She had streaks on her face from crying. She cried, "My toy. I lost my toy. It fell into the drain, and I can't get to it." She pointed to a grate for draining water that was close to the fountain's edge. Jake walked over and looked down. He could see something small and colorful stuck in the grate about 2 feet down. The drain was small and meant to move extra water away from the fountain. The holes in the grate were too small for the girl's hand to fit through, and even if she could reach it, the toy was too far down. "I see it," Jake said. He looked at the situation very closely. The opening was small and the drain was deep. He couldn't get his own hand through the grate because it was too big, and he couldn't take it off without special tools. But he thought of something. Jake went back to his toolbox and got out a flexible retrieval tool that he sometimes used to fish screws that had fallen into tight spaces. It was mostly a long, thin metal cable with a small claw at the end that you could move by squeezing a handle. He had used it 100 times for different kinds of maintenance work. He went back to the drain and carefully pushed the cable through the grate. The little girl had stopped crying and was looking at him with big, hopeful eyes. Jake moved the cable around obstacles slowly and carefully, trying to get the claw close to the toy. It took a few tries. The toy kept getting away from the claw, or he would grab it but lose his grip when he tried to pull it up. "Almost got it," he said quietly, more to himself than to the girl. "Just have to get the angle right." The claw finally caught the toy securely on its 5th try. Jake carefully pulled the cable back up, making sure not to let it fall. The toy came out of the drain. It was a small stuffed animal that looked like an alien animal with a lot of eyes and soft blue fur. It was dirty and wet from the drain, but it was still whole. "Here you go," Jake said as he gave it to the girl. The whole face changed. The tears went away right away, and a smile so bright and pure appeared that it made Jake smile too. She picked up the toy and hugged it tightly to her chest. Then she looked up at Jake with love in her eyes. "Thanks. You are a hero." Jake laughed and shook his head. "I am just a janitor who happens to have the right tool for the job. Next time, make sure you hold on to that toy more tightly, okay?" The little girl nodded seriously, still holding on to the stuffed animal she had saved. "I will. I promise." "Thanks, thanks, thanks." She hugged the toy again, and then ran off toward the palace. She probably wanted to find her mother and tell her about the nice person who saved her toy. Jake smiled as he watched her leave. She thought he had just done something very brave. He thought it was just a few minutes of his day to help someone who needed it. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing out of the ordinary. It's just basic human decency. Jake didn't know that Princess Lyra was watching the whole thing from her own room. She had been watching him for days with different cameras set up around the palace. Every little thing you do, that is nice. Every time he helped someone without being asked. He always helped people who couldn't give him anything in return. She saw him help older servants carry heavy things. She saw him fix broken machines in places that no one important ever went to. She saw him patiently listen to staff members who just needed someone to talk to about their problems. And now she watched him carefully pull a toy out of a drain for a child. These weren't big gestures. Most people wouldn't notice or remember them because they were small, quiet times. But to Princess Lyra, they told her everything she needed to know about Jake Miller. The grand hall of the Imperial Palace had never been so full of tension. All the princes who had taken part in the royal trial were waiting, and their faces showed different levels of frustration, confusion, and barely hidden anger. They had spent days proving themselves by bringing back impossible treasures from all over the galaxy, trying to solve riddles that couldn't be solved, and fighting an opponent that couldn't be beaten. They had pushed themselves to their absolute limits, and now they were standing in front of Princess Lyra, waiting for her to make a decision. It was very quiet. Servants stood against the walls, barely able to breathe. Court advisors talked to each other in a nervous whisper. It felt like the whole palace was holding its breath. Princess Lyra sat on her throne and slowly moved her silver eyes over the princes who were there. Her face was calm and hard to read. At last, she stood up and walked down the steps of her platform. As she walked, her white hair floated softly around her shoulders. She stopped in the middle of the hall and looked at each prince one more time. "I've made my choice," she said, and her voice rang out clearly in the huge room. "The royal trial is over." The princes stood up straight, hope shining in their eyes, even though they were hurt and tired. Everyone still thought they had a chance. They all thought that their hard work would pay off. Princess Lyra went on. "I have seen enough. You have all shown amazing skills. You gave me things that are worth a lot of money. You tried things that would have beaten weaker people. You were brave and determined." Prince Drax smiled a little. This sounded like the start of good news. But Princess Lyra said, and that one word fell like a stone into still water. "None of you have won the trial." The hall went crazy right away. Voices that didn't make sense mixed together, making a wave of noise that went through the room. The princes stepped forward, and their diplomatic calm started to break down. Prince Drax was the first to speak, and his deep voice cut through the noise. "What do you mean, Your Highness?" he asked, trying hard to keep his voice polite. "We brought you treasures from all over the galaxy. Things that were so valuable that kingdoms would fight over them. What else could you possibly want?" Next came Prince Vorn's mechanical voice, which was cold and clear. "I solved math problems in hours that would take other people years. I showed that I was better at technology than anyone else. What standard have we not met?" Prince Kellen's flames rose higher as he got more angry. "I almost died fighting that thing in the arena. Everyone did. We showed how strong, brave, and worthy we are. What was the point of all this if none of us won?" Other princes joined in, and their voices made a chorus of protest and confusion. They had been very polite during the whole trial, but that was quickly fading away. Princess Lyra let them talk and waited patiently for the noise to stop on its own. "You are right," she said when she could be heard again. "You did all of those things. And they were great. Really. But you didn't show me what I really needed to see." "Then what do you want?" Prince Drax asked, barely able to control his anger. "What are we being judged by?" Princess Lyra smiled then, a smile that made a few of the princes shift uncomfortably. That smile made it seem like they had all missed something obvious, something that should have been clear from the start. She said softly, "I need someone who knows that real leadership isn't about showing off power. I need someone who is kind even when no one is looking. Someone who puts people before power and kindness before winning." The princes looked at each other in confusion. What was she talking about? "And I have found such a person," Princess Lyra went on. "He has been here in the palace the whole time, showing me exactly what I wanted while all of you were racing across the galaxy looking for treasures." Now the confusion turned into fear. The princes looked at each other and thought about who she might be talking about. Did one of them send a representative they didn't know about? Was there another royal candidate they missed? Princess Lyra looked at one of her advisors who was standing by the door. "Get me Jake Miller," she said. "The janitor, who is a person." There was complete silence for a moment. The hall was loud again, but this time it was different. People gasped in shock. Shouts of disbelief. People who thought this was a joke laughed nervously. A janitor? A person? Not possible. This had to be some kind of test, another challenge they didn't get yet. As word went out to find this Jake Miller person, the princes looked at the doors with a mix of interest and disgust. It took a few minutes. The tension in the room got worse. A very confused person in the lower levels of the palace was being told that Princess Lyra had called him to the Grand Hall right away. 2 palace guards found Jake while he was fixing an air filtration unit that wasn't working right. They were polite but insistent, saying he had to come right away. Jake said he was dirty and should at least wash his hands and change into something cleaner, but they said there wasn't enough time. Now Princess Lyra wanted to see him. Jake walked through the palace halls still wearing his maintenance uniform. His hands still smelled faintly of cleaning solutions and mechanical grease. On the polished floors, his boots made a little noise. He was trying to figure out what he could have done wrong, and his mind was racing. Did he break something? Did he clean something he wasn't supposed to? Did you offend someone important without knowing it? Jake stopped moving when the huge doors to the Grand Hall opened, and he stepped inside. There were a lot of people in the hall. Princes wearing fancy armor and robes. court officials dressed up, servants in their best clothes. And right in the middle of it all was Princess Lyra, looking straight at him. Everyone in the room turned to look at the human janitor standing in the doorway. Jake's face turned red with embarrassment. He knew very well how out of place he looked, how small and ordinary he was compared to everyone else in this room. He walked slowly forward, and the sudden silence made his footsteps sound louder. He stopped when he was far enough away from Princess Lyra to be polite and tried to remember how to show respect to royalty. He had seen other people bow, so he tried to do the same thing, but he felt weird and self-conscious. "Your Highness, you wanted to see me?" Jake asked, and his voice sounded much smaller than he meant it to. It was clear that he was nervous. "I did," Princess Lyra said. To Jake's surprise, she stepped down from her platform and walked right up to him. The crowd gasped in shock at the movement. Royalty did not talk to commoners. Common people went up to royalty. This break in protocol was almost as shocking as seeing Jake in the hall. Princess Lyra came to a stop only a few feet away from him. Jake wanted to look away because her silver eyes were studying his face so closely, but he made himself meet her gaze. Princess Lyra said in a loud voice that everyone in the hall could hear, "I've been watching all of you for the past week. The princes showed me how powerful, rich, and talented they were. They brought me things that were worth more than whole planets. They tried to figure out puzzles that have stumped the smartest people in history. They fought against an enemy that was meant to be unbeatable." Jake listened, not understanding why he was hearing this. "But you, Jake Miller," Princess Lyra said, turning a little to talk to both Jake and the crowd, "you showed me something much more valuable than any of that." "I don't get it," Jake said quietly, really confused. "You were nice to me when no one important was watching," Princess Lyra said. "You helped an old servant carry heavy boxes, not because anyone asked you to, but because it was the right thing to do. You solved an old puzzle not to get credit, but just because you saw the answer and thought it might help. You spent time getting a child's toy out of a drain, which didn't help you in any way other than knowing that you had helped someone who was sad." Jake's face was getting even hotter. He didn't know that anyone had been paying attention to those times. Those were just everyday things. Being polite. Not much. "You helped people without wanting credit," Princess Lyra said next. "You saw people, not their jobs or positions. You never thought you would get a reward or recognition. You just acted with kindness all the time." She turned to look at the gathered princes, and her voice got louder. The royal trial was never about being strong, having a lot of money, or being able to do hard things. It was about who you are. A real leader doesn't have to show off to prove themselves. A real leader shows who they are in small, quiet moments when they think no one is watching. When helping someone doesn't help you in any way other than knowing you did the right thing. Prince Vorn stepped forward, his mechanical body stiff, with barely controlled rage. His glowing eyes looked at Jake with a cold look of judgment. "This is rude," he said in a sharp, cutting voice. "He is a cleaner. Someone who works in maintenance. He doesn't have a title, an army, any resources, or any power. How could you compare him to us?" The fight in the Grand Hall went on for almost an hour after Princess Lyra made her announcement. The princes yelled their objections. Advisors to the court talked about protocol. Palace officials were worried about the political fallout. But Princess Lyra stuck to her guns. Jake Miller, the human janitor, had shown that he was worthy in ways that were much more important than money or military power. 1 week from that day, the official coronation was set to take place. News of the choice spread across the galaxy faster than the speed of light. As people heard the unbelievable story, communication networks lit up on thousands of worlds. A person, a cleaner, chosen over princes who led armies and ruled whole star systems. Reactions poured in on social media sites that linked civilizations across huge distances. People said Princess Lyra was crazy. They said she was crazy and that she was throwing away political alliances and making Vexera look weak. There was a lot of worry in diplomatic circles. A number of governments sent her official messages asking if she had made the right choice. Political analysts on news networks looked at every possible angle and said it would end badly. But some people saw things differently. People who worked hard and lived normal lives found something inspiring in the story. Someone like them, an average person who just tried to be good, had been noticed and appreciated. Teachers used it to teach their students. Parents told their kids that being kind is more important than being powerful. Even Princess Lyra was surprised by how much the story affected her. Jake didn't even notice most of the noise outside. He was too busy trying to figure out what had happened to his life. He was mopping floors and fixing pipes one day. The next day, he was getting fitted for formal robes and learning how to act like a king. It was like a dream. Palace workers who had hardly noticed him before now treated him with nervous respect. He kept saying that he was still the same person, but everything around him had changed. The week flew by in a flurry of planning. Jake's advisors tried to teach him about Vexaran culture and politics in the galaxy. He stayed up late every night studying things like trade agreements and diplomatic customs that he never thought he would need to know. It was scary and tiring. He felt like he was in way over his head. But Jake kept doing what he had always done through it all. He helped when he saw a servant having trouble with a job. He fixed things when he saw they were broken. He listened when someone looked worried or upset. Even though things had changed, he couldn't stop being who he was. Princess Lyra quietly approved of how he handled this change. She saw that he treated everyone the same, no matter what their job was. She saw that he asked questions when he didn't understand something instead of pretending to know. She saw that he was honest about his fears and doubts instead of pretending to be confident. Every piece of evidence showed that she had made the right choice. 3 days before the coronation, Princess Lyra visited Jake's room. He was sitting at a desk full of papers he was trying to read, and he looked tired and stressed. She softly knocked on the door that was open. "Can I come in?" she asked. Jake stood up quickly, almost knocking over his chair. "Of course, Your Highness. This is your castle. You can go anywhere you want." She smiled at how nervous he was. "I wanted to talk to you about something that matters. Before the coronation, you have to take one last test." Jake's stomach started to hurt. "Another test? I thought the trial was done." Princess Lyra walked into the room and shut the door behind her. "The royal trial is over," she said. "But every leader of Vexara must follow one tradition. They have to fight the Guardian of the Void." Jake thought about the stories he had heard about the princes who fought that thing. How each one had been hurt and beaten. His mouth got dry. "I'm not a fighter. I wouldn't last 10 seconds against that thing." "I know," Princess Lyra said in a calm voice. "And that is exactly why this test is important. You shouldn't try to beat the Guardian in battle. People should be able to understand it. Every leader must face it, not to show how strong they are, but to show how smart they are." She walked over to a chair near his desk and sat down, moving slowly and gracefully. The princess saw it as a monster that needed to be killed, a problem that can be solved with violence and power. But that was never the goal. The Guardian is not a test of fighting skill, but of character. Jake slowly sat back down, his mind racing. "What am I supposed to do?" "You'll know when you face it," Princess Lyra said. "Have faith in yourself. Have faith in the traits that got you here. Will you take on this last challenge?" Jake thought about everything that had happened, about how everything in his life had changed, about the huge weight of responsibility that was on his shoulders, about how scared he was of not succeeding. But he also thought about the people who had faith in him, the servants who smiled at him as they walked by, the kid whose toy he had saved. Princess Lyra herself saw something in him that was worth recognizing. "I'll do it," he said softly. Jake woke up the next morning and found himself at the entrance to the combat arena deep below the palace, the same place where the princes had fought and lost. He could hear his heart beating in his ears. He didn't wear any armor or other protective gear. He just wore simple clothes. He didn't have any weapons. He was alone, just like Princess Lyra had told him to be. The doors to the arena opened with a loud grinding sound. Jake walked into the big round room. The floor had scars and burns from fights that had happened before. The walls were covered in scorch marks. The smell of burnt metal and ozone filled the air. People could see through observation windows high up. Jake knew that Princess Lyra was up there with a lot of other people, including officials and advisors. He tried not to think about how they were watching. The Guardian of the Void stood in the middle of the arena. It was scarier up close than Jake had thought it would be. 20 feet of twisted metal and organic tissue were covered in black armor that looked like it absorbed light. Its huge body had a lot of arms, and each one had a different weapon on the end. Red eyes glowed with intelligence that wasn't human. Small bolts of energy crackled across its surface. Jake saw the Guardian and started to move. The ground shook when it walked. The weapons on its arms came to life and hummed with power. People had made this creature to push warriors to their limits and test them through fear and combat. It had beaten everyone who had ever fought it. Jake stood there, frozen in fear, as his mind screamed at him to run. Every part of him told him to run away from this monster as fast as he could. But he made himself stay put, to take a breath, to think. The Guardian's roar shook Jake's whole body. Then it ran, 20 tons of metal and rage rushing at him at an impossible speed. Jake had about 3 seconds before he hit. His body wanted to move, to avoid, to do something. But his mind chose something else. He stood firm and spoke. His voice was shaky, but you could hear him clearly. "I don't want to hurt you." The Guardian stopped so suddenly that it slid a few feet because of its speed. It stood there, frozen, with its glowing eyes on Jake. Its huge shape gave off a sense of confusion. No one had ever